Hello everyone. So today we are going to learn about how to perform input validations using global caches and XORD. But before we try to understand what is global caches and what is XORD, we first need to understand what is input validation and why do we need input validation and how to perform it. So let me open my Postman, and over here as you can see I have created a post request. Inside my post request I am trying to send a array of numbers to my backend API in the body. So let me open my VS Code over here, and as you can see I have created a backend API to handle my post request. And what this backend API is doing, it simply fetches the array of numbers from my request dot body over here, and I'm trying to save it into a variable, and from that variable I'm trying to fetch the length of the array, and I'm simply sending back the length of my array as a response to the postman. So let's try to run this code and let's find out whether this piece of code is running perfectly or not. Okay, so I'm trying to send the request from the postman. I sent the request, and as you can see over here the length of the array is 3. So this block of code is running fine. So over here what we did is that we try sending the valid inputs to our backend APIs from our HTTP post request, and hence we did not face any issues. But now let's try to send the invalid inputs to our backend APIs, and let's see what's the outcome for the same piece of code that we have written over here. So now let me just simply remove this JSON object from my requested body in my HTTP request. And as I'm now sending the invalid input to my backend APIs, and let me send this and let's see what's the response. As you can see, I'm getting a whole lot of exception which is thrown from my Express server straight to the client side. And as you can see, my all the vulnerabilities of my server are now exposed to the client. All the modules, node modules that I have used in my backend server are now exposed to the client side. Okay, so this is the reason that why we should use input validations in our websites, because as you can see I simply sent a invalid input from my HTTP post request, and the entire vulnerabilities are now visible to the client side in form of an exception which was thrown by my Express server. So these vulnerabilities can be used by the hackers to perform various cyber attacks on your websites. So now please allow me to quickly introduce a middleware to you which would at least prevent from sending these exception messages from our Express server straight to the client. And instead of that, we could send our customized error messages as a response to the client side. So coming back to VS Code, this is the same code as the previous one, but the only difference is that I have added a middleware at the bottom. This middleware is nothing but global caches. What it does, it accepts 4 arguments: error, request, response, and next. And in the body of this middleware, I'm simply throwing a error message saying something went wrong in the response. So two pointers that you should keep in mind while writing your own global caches. So the first one is that it should be located at the bottom of your all the backend routes. So suppose over here there are multiple routes. In my case, I have only written one. So let me copy paste this again and again. So as you can see now, I have written 3 backend routes which handle the HTTP requests, and I am going to write my global cache at the bottom, my middleware of global cache at the bottom. Once I am done writing all my backend APIs, I will include my global cache at the bottom of my code. So what it will does is that whenever the exception is been thrown from any of my backend routes, the control will reach to my middleware and the response will be thrown as my own customized error message rather than sending the error message of the Express. And the second pointer which you should keep in mind while writing your own global caches is that the middleware would accept 4 arguments: error, request, response, and next. And at the beginning you should write app.use. Why app.use? Because remember guys, global caches is a middleware. So app.use lets your Express compiler know that okay, this is a middleware, and by encountering 4 arguments, the Express compiler would also come to know that this is a global caches middleware. So to summarize, only 2 things to keep in mind while writing your own global caches middleware is that first, it should be at the bottom after you are done writing all your backend APIs, and second is that it should accept 4 arguments. No rocket science over here. The concept of global caches is straightforward and simple. So by far, we came to know that how we can use global caches to send a reasonable error messages as a response to a client. Now we will try to understand how we can use Zord library to validate our input that we are going to send in our HTTP post requests. So now let's suppose that you need to provide input validation in this scenario, and you are not aware about what Zord library is. You are just a beginner in your software development journey and you are just starting out. So how would you provide input validation in this case? So what I would do is that I would simply use if else. So what if else would does is that it will check first that whether the parameters that I'm getting from request.body should not be undefined. Okay, if it is not undefined, that I will move ahead and I will check whether the type of the parameter should be number. If it is not number, then I would throw a error message, sorry, something went wrong. If the type of the parameter is number, then I will show a success message. So if you are dealing with simple data types and you are trying to send simple data types from your request.body from the HTTP request, so in this case it is possible and achievable to use if else to provide input validations, as you can see over here. But now let's suppose a scenario which is a very common scenario when you will be building your own websites. So this scenario is that a user is trying to sign up, and this is a sign up object, and this is a complex data type. This data type comprises of multiple properties. This property can be anything, as over here I have used email, password and country, and there could also be even more properties included in this object, and it can be of different types as well. One property could be string, another property could be integer, one property could be decimal. Okay, so how in this case you would use if else to provide input validations? And it would be extremely inconvenient in this case to provide input validations using if else. So how you can overcome this problem? You can simply overcome this problem by using Zord library. So what is Zord library? So Zord library is a schema validator which helps us to provide input validation to any schema. And what is schema over here? Schema can be anything. It can be a simple string or a complex object over here, as you can see. So now let's create your own HTTP post route which would handle input validations with help of Zord library. So let's try to code this. So first let us try to understand what's the requirement for this assignment. So I am going to send a complex data type of user sign up object with three properties. The three properties are email. Email should be string and the type must be email. Second is password. The password should be at least 8 character long, and the country of the user should be either India or either USA. Okay, I hope the requirement is clear. So now let's try to code it. The first thing that you need to do is that you need to install Zord. So npm install Zord. Type this in your command line and simply hit enter. So once you have installed Zord, we can move ahead and try to understand the code. Over here, as you can see, I have created a schema. And what this schema variable is, it's simply a Zord object with three properties: email, password, and country. And over here, as you can see, I am using inbuilt properties of Zord, which would help me validate my inputs that are going to come from the HTTP request. So the first property that I'm going to use of Zord is Zord.string. It is saying that email should be string and it should also be a type of email, that the string which is going to come should have a .com and a at the rate and all these things inside the string. Okay. And the second thing is password. The password should also be Zord.string and the minimum length should be at least 8 character. Okay. The third property is country. The country should be a Zord.literal. It should be either in or Zord.literal USA. Okay. So over here, after creating a Zord object, I will move ahead. This is a simple HTTP post request, and how I will use this Zord object that I have created for input validation. Over here, as you can see, I am fetching the sign up object from my request.body and storing it into a variable called as signup obj. And later on, I have called save parse function on my schema object. What does this save parse function does is that it simply compares the object coming from my request.body with this Zod object that I've created over here. It compares each and every property. So in our case, it compares the email property coming from the request.body with the email property of this Zod.object, and same for the password and the country as well. So suppose if the email is invalid, suppose the string for email is missing the .com inside it, and also the password is not 8 character long, it is 6 character long. So in this case, Zod will through a inbuilt error messages saying that let's try to find out what that exact error message is. So let me try to run this code, and over here the password is 8 character long, so let me change it to 7 character long. So now the password is invalid, right? Because the in the in this odd object we have mentioned that the password should be minimum 8 characters, but I am passing 7 characters. So let's see what's the inbuilt error message thrown by this odd is. So over here you can see I have received a error message which was thrown by the Zod itself. I have not written this piece of code anywhere in my apps in my server. So what this error message says is that the code too small, minimum 8. The message string must contain at least 8 characters. Path password. So this is the property which created the issue. So this was the error message. So now let's try to see what is the inbuilt success message thrown by the Zod. So let me change the character length back to 8 and let me try to send it. So this is the inbuilt success message thrown by the Zod. So coming back to the code, so whatever response which is sent from the safe parse function, whatever the response has been written from the safe parse function is stored in this variable, and I am simply returning this variable as a response to the client. Okay, you already see the response, saw the response in my postman. So this was all about the Zod library and how to incorporate or implement it into your own code. I hope this syntax and this concept of Zod is clear to you. Yeah, and I would urge you to please practice this at your end as well. And I will post this code in the GitHub, and I will share the link in my description as soon as possible. So please go ahead and try this out, and see you in the next video. In the next video, we will be trying to understand what is JWT, how you can provide your own authentication to your backend APIs, and see you soon. And thanks for watching this video.